Welcome to the fourth of five workshops on UC personal insight questions put together by myself, Erica, at the City College of San Francisco Reading and Writing Center. So if you haven't already finished your drafts and gone through the previous videos, please do that first before returning to this one. So in this session, we're going to be looking at the work you've already done and trying to fit it into that 350 word length limit that you have on your personal insight question essays. So to do this, we are going to work on being more concise through cutting through word choice and other ways of cutting the number of words. And we're also going to be working on eliminating repetition. And finally, we'll go over some resources. So there are a number of ways to be more concise, which basically means saying the same thing in fewer words. So you're not losing any meaning, you're just saying it more in a way, usually that's more direct, and that just doesn't take as long. So one way to be a little more precise or concise in your writing is avoiding using more than two prepositional phrases in a sentence. Now, this is not a rule, it's a guideline. But first, we need to go over what is a prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase is a phrase or a group of words that begins with a preposition and then has a noun that follows it. So let's take a look at this example right here. So in the sentence, one of the reasons we are unable to move into the office in Santa Barbara on time is that the details of the build-out have not yet been finalized. That's really wordy, isn't it? And it's actually 28 words long. We can identify the prepositional phrases in here by, well, they're highlighted in yellow. Notice that all of these phrases begin with a small word that explains relationships between time, place, people, or ideas. And so these words in this example are of, into, in, on, and of. So those are all prepositions. And what follows each of these is a noun or an adjective and a noun. So of the reasons, remember a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. So reasons is a thing. So of the reasons, into the office, in Santa Barbara. So Santa Barbara is a place. It's a proper noun, but it's still a noun. So this is a prepositional phrase in Santa Barbara. On time and of the build out. So there are 5 prepositional phrases in here, and that's what's making it so wordy. So if we could potentially change some of these prepositional phrases into adjectives, that would make this shorter. But say the same thing. What's an adjective? As a reminder, an adjective is a word that describes a noun. So we're going to see if we can take some of these prepositions and turn them into adjectives that describe some of the nouns. So I'm going to switch over to our resource that this will be linked to later on. I'm going to switch over to that so that we can work with some more examples. Here we go. So I'm going to stop share and reshare just to make sure you're looking at what I'm looking at. Okay, so we have our example here. We can get this to at least 23 words by changing some of these prepositional phrases into adjectives. So rather than into the office in Santa Barbara, which in itself is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words, we can change that into 3 words by changing it into or 4 words, the Santa Barbara office. So we keep Santa Barbara, which is a noun in this case, but then we turn it into an adjective in the second version, because now Santa Barbara is describing what kind of office? And that allows, so making that little switch makes it more concise. Instead of having of the build details of the build out, we can change of the build out to just build out details. So we move this noun over here, build out, put it in front of details and get rid of the. So then by the time we've done that, we've lost 5 words, but we're saying exactly the same thing. And that's the goal with making your writing more concise. We have a couple of 3 examples here that you could try. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to try to first identify the prepositional phrases and then try to make the sentences more concise. So we'll come back in 3 minutes and see what you could do. Okay, we're back. So hopefully you have had enough time to try this. So let's see what you came up with. Ideally, let's first identify those prepositional phrases. So if you identified of the meeting time, that would be one. On the long-winded updates would be a second prepositional phrase. And a third would be of one team member. So there are 3. Sometimes, so this last one team member, if you have an of, usually many times that implies possession. So if you have an of something, you might be able to take the noun in that prepositional phrase, team member, and turn it into a possessive. So in this case, team members updates. So that would be one change you could make. And also time is implied in meeting, so you can get rid of time, but that's a redundancy, which we'll talk about later. So this could change to most of the meeting was spent on one team member's long-winded updates. That would be one. You could go further than that, but that is the probably easiest way to make this more concise. For number 2, prepositional phrases, we have a frame of time, and we have in which, and to not to speak. To speak seems like it might be a prepositional phrase, but it's not. So the easiest one to switch in this one would be, instead of a frame of time, just a time frame. So you take that noun in of time and move it to the left to describe what it's describing, frame. Immediately you get rid of one word. So that is, getting rid of extra prepositional phrases is one way to make your writing more concise. Now, I would recommend pausing the video and going to your own writing and identifying if you have lots of prepositional phrases. And if you do, give this a try in some of your sentences to make them more concise. But we are going to move on to our next slide, which is sentence focus. So sentence focus means making sure your sentence starts or has a subject that's what you're actually writing about. It requires that you use active voice, and that you make who did what is clear. So in this example, the frog was dissected by the student. The frog is what was dissected. It's the object, and it's at the beginning. And then this is in passive voice. It was dissected. And the person doing the dissection, the student, is at the very end of the sentence. But since they're the one doing the action, we want them up front. So to make this sentence active voice, it should read, the student dissected the frog. So you get rid of 2 words by making this into active voice. It's more concise. We're going to go to another resource that you will have access to at the end of this session. And that is Writing Concisely, Part 3, Sentence Focus. Okay, so we have our frog example here. Let me make sure you can see this. We have our frog example here. Another issue that comes up in sentence focus is the overuse of there are and it is. Using there are is fine if you're talking about the existence of something. But if the point isn't existence, like there is a God, there is not a God, that kind of thing, then you're probably bearing what you're actually talking about in your subject. So let's take a look at this. Here's an example. It is understood that costs will be cut going forward. Well, it is not the subject. We don't know what it is. And what's really happening is understanding, but who understands? So we need to replace that unknown subject with who it actually is talking about. Everyone understands that the company will be cutting costs. So in this unfocused example, it starts with it is, and then it also uses passive voice, both problems. So we can change, even though the sentence appears longer, it's actually shorter in terms of number of words. So the unfocused sentence has 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 words, and the focused sentence has 9 words. So it cuts it by 1 word, but sometimes when you're writing a PIQ, that makes all the difference. So I'm going to ask you to try this as well. Maybe let's try number one together, and then I'll go over what you hopefully found. So I'll pause the video for about 2 minutes so that you can give that a try. Okay, hopefully that was enough time there. So with number one, it will be difficult to manage the budget in this environment. What is difficult? We don't know what it is. It is not a subject here. So we need to change that subject to what it actually we're focusing on, which really is managing the budget. So we need to make a little word switch. This requires, it's like a puzzle, right? We need to play around with our words to see what fits best. So managing the budget will be difficult in this environment. So that only eliminates one word, but the sentence is much clearer. And again, in PIQs, every word counts. So so I would keep practicing with this, and then use the search and replace feature in whatever word processing software you're using, Google Docs or Word, and search for there is and there are and it is, and see if you tend to use this structure. If you do, working on this can be a key way to make your writing more concise. Okay, so we're going to go back to our slides here. Thank you for your patience. And we're going to talk about eliminating redundancy now. So there are different ways you can be redundant, which means saying the same thing needlessly. You could use the same word over and over, in which case you may not need to use it so much, or you might want to have a different word choice. Redundancy can mean using two words or phrases that have the same meaning. You can have filler phrases that don't really add anything to what you're saying, such as, it is important to say, words like that. That happens more in academic essay writing than PIQs, but sometimes it can come up in that context too. Having unnecessarily large words when just to sound smart, when there is a just as precise word that will work. So an example of that might be utilization instead of use. And also stating information that is already implied. That's a common way of being redundant. And so doing that is another way we can get rid of extra words. So let's look at this example. Most recipes I found online instruct to add 1 packet of yeast to water warm to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, but the only thermometer I had measured temperature in Celsius. Well, there's a bit of redundancy, especially here, stating information that is already implied, and using two words or phrases with the same meaning. The fact that I found a recipe online doesn't really matter from the context, right? It's just that the recipes are online. So I'm going to get I found out of there. I'm going to remove it. So it just says most recipes online or most online recipes, even better. And then the other redundant item in the sentence is temperature. We already know that Fahrenheit and Celsius are temperatures, so we don't have to say temperature. We could just say, but the only thermometer I had was in Celsius. We also know that temperature is, by definition, a measure, so we can get rid of the word measure as well. So that would be getting rid of those redundant phrases makes the sentence clearer and more concise. There are some common redundant phrases here, some ones that are likely to come up when you're writing about your personal experience, might be already existing, currently underway, period of time, end results, final outcome, future plans. All of these are redundant phrases. So the word that is in parentheses, like future and future plans, you can get rid of that word because plans implies the future. So you don't need both words. So look for these in your writing. Finally, there are some resources that we have online. Some of what I was showing you today are in this space. So if you go to the Reading and Writing Center class, you can search in Canvas for course number 36214. That will be the Reading and Writing Center Canvas course. It's not actually a course, it's just resources. You can sign up for that. And then when you get to the home page, you can choose grammar exercises and reading and writing references. Scroll down to LOCKS, which stands for lower order concerns, and then choose style. And then choose writing concisely, parts 1 through 4. And there's loads of exercises and tips there to help you with this as you move through your own writing. So by the time you have finished this aspect of your essay writing, you will be almost done. So before you get to the next video, try to have a solid draft of all your PIQ essays, ideally within that 275 to 350 word range. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.